Hey, good morning, and welcome to another edition of Free Associative Radio, presenting 15 Minutes of Flame live from Austin, Texas. Robert Phoenix here. What's happening? It is 9/11. This is the new thing. The new thing is starting to broadcast at 9/11. I think we're just going to throw heat. We're going to throw some heat and some light on 9/11 because we just had another 9/11 styled event in our midst. It is still happening in real time, no matter what the mainstream media would like to do to direct your attention elsewhere. And not just the mainstream media, but perhaps forces that are much larger than you and I might be able to comprehend. Forces and powers much larger than we might be able to comprehend. But since we are the David in the David versus Goliath parable of our times, we endeavor to do our very best and take our slingshots and aim it right at the third eye, the pineal gland of the giants, so that we can, at the very least, do our best to level the playing field and overcome these powers and principalities that we clash against on a daily basis. It is front and center. It is no longer cloaked. It is no longer occluded or occulted. It is definitely becoming revealed as we move further and further into this post 9/11, post-historical time, post-2012 moment in new history. So it's all becoming much more visible. It's called the revelation of the method and the externalization of the hierarchy, which I've talked about on a number of occasions in this format and in others. And to break it down, those represent two separate kinds of modalities, but they wrap around and connect. So just to, if you're new to the show, if you're new to this broadcast on a daily basis and not familiar with some of the terms that I use, let me just break it down for you. The revelation of the method is a process where we are being shown to some degree what's going on. But it's never really completely enough. It satiates the masses to some extent. But instead of getting a nice, big, warm loaf of bread, what we get are a few crumbs. And it's up to us to kind of feed off those crumbs until we can get to this next kind of moment in time where hopefully we get a nice, big, fat loaf of warm bread that's just come out of the oven. But in that process, bits and pieces are revealed. But what is really being shown to us? We're being just shown a portion of an event. We're being shown a portion of the method. So this is what's taking place with Las Vegas. It's very sloppy. There are lots of loose ends. And to some extent, I believe that is part of the process. That is part of what we're being shown. And at the same time, we're not getting the full Monty, as they say. The externalization of the hierarchy comes from Madame Blavatsky in ISIS Unveiled, where she talks about how the hierarchy, which are the invisible powers, the brotherhood, the great white brotherhood, externalizes their teachings amongst the masses in an occult theater and esoteric paradigm that we're all being indoctrinated into. This is, again, sort of post-New Age, when everything New Age becomes part of the mainstream, and not really the best parts of the New Age, to be quite honest with you. There are some decent parts of the New Age, don't get me wrong. Don't really necessarily want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because some cool things unfolded essentially from about 1960. I guess we could go back to, 67, the birth of the Summer of Love. I guess we could just kind of go 67 to 2012, that is the high point of the New Age. And then after 2012, post-2012, we're into something else. So the revelation of the method is this disclosure. It's a form of disclosure, whether it's direct or indirect. And what we're seeing with the Las Vegas event is an indirect form of disclosure. We have the direct forms of disclosure, which are much more blatant in many ways. And then the externalization of the hierarchy is the indoctrination into esoteric and occult theater. This is what it's about. So here we are. We are now, let's see, what is the date? We're now 10 days past 10/1 when this event in Las Vegas occurred. It's we're still putting the pieces together, and there's so many inconsistencies. First of all, there's a receipt. There's a receipt that shows that Stephen Paddock, or whoever that guy was, in that hotel room was there before the police actually said he was there. Okay, so that's an anomaly that needs to be addressed, and the mainstream media won't address the anomaly. The reason why the mainstream media won't address the anomaly is because they're the same people, basically, that are behind the event in Las Vegas. They are all complicit. It's part of a network. Yes, it's part of it. It's part of a massive network that controls the information, controls money, controls migration. Yeah, that's all part of one network, intertwined. So they're not going to bite. They're not going to go down any rabbit hole unless it's the Weinstein rabbit hole, which we'll get into. They're all over that, boy, because they've got the marching orders and they've got the new script. Isn't it interesting how that's all happened after the Las Vegas event? We'll talk about that, but we want to get into Las Vegas a bit more here. People are having right now, the evolution of this event is happening at a breathtaking rate. And when I talk about the evolution, I'm not talking about it from the mainstream media perspective. I'm talking about it from the perspective of people that were there in Las Vegas, that they're putting together these real-time videos. You can go onto YouTube and you'll see these videos that they're basically using like 4 different screens or 4 different perspectives that are all time sequenced and synced. I swear. I mean, this is kind of this moment in time, and it's really interesting because we talked about this with on Randy and Emily's show the last time I was on there last week, just right after Las Vegas, and I talked about a new TV series coming out called The Wisdom of the Crowd, and it's with Jeremy Piven, who plays this grieving father who employs literally hundreds of thousands of people with cell phones and computers. I mean, this is the spin-off now of what happened with Pizzagate, what's happened with what we call the citizen journalists or the netizens. This is a really interesting kind of concept and idea, and at the same time, it's like where are they going to take that, and where are they going to steer that concept? Because it's very real. We're living in a society now where the iPhone is probably represents the best and worst of our times. Like, it is something that is like hooked into my kid like a cyber succubus on his brain that I have to pry apart every time we get together. I'm not crazy about that. Not crazy about how it's really cut into true FaceTime versus fake FaceTime. But at the same time, it's become a very powerful tool in terms of real-time capture and reporting. Now, YouTube is starting to scuttle a lot of the footage that people have posted on YouTube. So I think it's going to be mightily important that we find an alternative to YouTube. There's some of them out there. DTube, I believe, is one. BitChute's another. So, at some point, YouTube is going to flip the switch, and they're going to become a kind of a channel, like a Netflix or so they're going to create a YouTube channel, and it probably on Roku at the very least, and maybe the Sony PlayStation systems, and they may actually be a channel that will be picked up by your cable provider. So this is the evolution of YouTube. YouTube will essentially outgrow its platform on the internet. And so there will always be something that will come along that will replace YouTube. The challenge with anybody that starts a business like that is bandwidth. How can you afford the bandwidth, and YouTube, Google gets massive, I believe that they probably get massive breaks from the government because they're doing the government's work. Basically, Google is an offshoot of DARPA and the CIA, all developed at Stanford University, CIA West. We've looked into Stanford before. So I'm sure they get massive breaks for storing all that data somewhere. They have to. They have to. Because the amount of data that they store is tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. Just think of the YouTube videos alone, not to mention everything that's associated with Google, both online and offline. It's a huge operation. So that's the challenge for anybody starting a new version of YouTube, is the bandwidth, the storage capacity, how you pay for it, all that stuff. And of course, the so-called sponsors pay for it on YouTube. And YouTube is starting to make their own commercials and make their own sort of social media imprints, and it's all in response to people waking up. People are waking up at a rapid rate. Now, this started prior, I think, to the Trump election, but the Trump election was an accelerant to the awakening process. Remember that word accelerant. We'll talk about that later in the Farcast today, or the 15 Minutes of Flame today. That's an important phrase to keep in mind. So we have this massive kind of deep learning experience. And I talked about deep learning on Randy and Emily's show as well. And deep learning is a process where AI is learning at a quantum level. And essentially, if you look at the history of cybernetics, like if you wanted to teach, and I talked about this before, if you wanted to teach an AI, which is an interface with, say, a piece of robotics, but AI it can be an autonomous agent, it can be a program, right? That's what AI is. So before, let's say you wanted to teach an AI agent how to handle billing. What you would do is you would just instruct the AI to look within the framework and the parameters of very specific functionality. So that would include taking in money or looking at money that's going out, time spent between money that's taken in and money that's going out, various perhaps variables in terms of where that money is coming from, the age range of the person that is on the hook for debt. All that stuff would be programmed in to that AI in a very specific set of parameters, which would be specifically about billing. Now, what they've done, and this is what Google has done in conjunction with Larry Page and come on, I'm having a blank moment here now. He always pops in Ray Kurzweil, is that they have pioneered AI deep learning. So instead of just having those specific parameters for the AI, what they do now is they flood the AI with all these variables of information. So yeah, they'll get the specific, money in, money out, the amount of time, the various user data, male, female, age, perhaps socioeconomic range, all that stuff, right? But then they'll get in things like the history of the Fed, they'll get the history of lending. I mean, all these different variables come flooding into the AI, so that what happens is that the AI then begins to make, guess what? Abstract correlations. They're not just now engaged in billing, they're engaged in making sort of interesting leaps in the process, like asset acquisition. And it's like, whoa, hold on a second. We just built this thing to, sort of control our billing cycles, but now all of a sudden it's giving us advice on how we can acquire assets, which makes our lag time during our billing cycles actually profitable. How can we monetize our billing? Wow. Now all of a sudden the machine is coming up with some very interesting ideas about monetizing lag time and billing. gee, isn't this interesting? You know, so this is what's happening with every single AI they're using now, pretty much. It's called deep learning. We are in the process of our own version of deep learning. So when we get into a situation like Las Vegas, and remember, if you go back 10 years, let's go back to 2007. And I was on YouTube a lot in 2007. It's nothing like it is today, trust me. I was on the internet, of course, most people were in 2007. And it's very different. I mean, Google was a lot more, how should I say this, content neutral. Now you've got to kind of go off the res to find some very interesting web searches. You go to DuckDuckGo or whatever. Start Page, by the way, is powered by Google. So it's a kind of a Google front. But now it's like YouTube has exploded. Podcasts have exploded. And it's like we are part of this deep learning experience as human beings. We're not AI, although some people might argue that. But we're developing some very complex and fascinating tools and abstraction when it comes to information and abstraction when it comes to making, data points that correlate from one thing to another. There's a whole kind of model of associative thinking that's taking place. Now, sometimes associative thinking isn't always the best thinking because it lacks a certain kind of logic associated with it, but it can also take us into kind of these quantum places where we're able to make these associations, or we're able to make these links between certain things where we're actually creating shortcuts in ways that we've never experienced before. By the way, this is a very Sagittarian thing. If you want to link it to something in astrology, it'd be very Sagittarian. If somebody has Mercury in Sagittarius, they can be really, really bright people. Sometimes they'll say things or they'll make mental leaps that make your head will scratch. It's like, well, how did you get there? Well, I just got there. I don't need to figure it out. This is a very Sagittarian thing. And on the flip side of that, having everything kind of logically laid out, and you can see the sequential relationship to the event and the person, that's very Gemini. So just wanted to give you kind of an astrological anchor to think about. So we're in this process of deep learning, and we're all mutating. We're all mutating. And it's an amazing thing to see. And the cool thing about this, okay, is that if you go back again about, 5 years. Let's go back to, say, 2012. That's when I was doing a lot of interviews with people on my radio show, because there were like so-called mages, high priests, people that were sifting through and breaking down information in ways that other people maybe didn't have a handle on. One of the reasons why I don't do a lot of interviews anymore is because that kind of paradigm has come to an end. I'll be quite honest with you. I mean, I was watching these people just make the rounds on all these different radio shows and all these different podcasts, and it's like, it became sort of boring to me in some ways. Like, I like interviewing people, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot that can come out in a dialogue, and I really enjoy dialoguing with people. But it became sort of like this circuit, and I began to see also that there were thousands of other people out there who weren't nearly as famous or well-known or as funded or as placed in a particular position in order to lead us down a particular path. And this is an exciting development because there's a lot happening out there. Somebody brought to my attention a YouTuber by the name of Truth by Grace, and this person has been breaking down the California fires. So this might be a good opportunity for us to make a segue into the post-Las Vegas historicity as it is and get into what's happened since then. So Truth by Grace, if you can look her up on YouTube, is breaking down the fact that these fires in Northern California are completely bizarre. almost unlike anything we've ever seen. And the reason why is because you'll see buildings that are completely just burned, almost, the rebar is twisted. And of course the structures are burned to the ground. But what you won't see is you won't see fire like around the house in trees. I mean, this is completely bizarre. I'm not there. I'm not on the ground. I wish I was. If I still lived in California, I'd go up there. I'd drive up there. And if you're listening to this and you live in Northern California, and I know some of my listeners do, some of them are actually people that live in Sonoma or Napa, it'd be great if you could maybe post some pictures on my Facebook page or whatever it is that you can do to kind of get it out there. But what I'm seeing is this bizarre, these bizarre images of homes that are just toast, and not just toast, but they're almost like violently charred, and there's it's almost like they're melted. Now, we live in a planet that's been sprayed with chemtrails for the last 25 plus years. I mean, I remember seeing, actually, boy, I guess we're going into 30 years now. Because I remember seeing my first chemtrails, really seeing them in 1997. That was the first time they just, I mean, maybe they were there before, but I wasn't paying attention, and I didn't get it. But I sure got it in 97. So this gives us 30 years worth of geoengineering on the planet. And of course, one of the main proponents or components of, it's component, not proponent, component of geoengineering is aluminum dioxide. And that shit has been sprayed all across the planet for the last 30 years. So it's been proven that while aluminum can be a retardant to flame, when it's desiccated and becomes part of this aluminum dioxide compound, that it actually becomes an accelerant. And it's not just aluminum, it's manganese, it's barium, it's iron oxide. So there's all these metals that have been leached into the ground. They cover our leaves. It's amazing that the trees can still survive after all this crap. It gives you kind of a better understanding about the strength and the power to endure by nature. But these fires that do pop up now, and not just now and then, but quite frequently, they're hotter. They're hotter than fires that have previously existed. The amount of heat and the intensity of the heat is really almost otherworldly, and not in a good way, right? In a hellish kind of otherworldly capacity. So we have the accelerant that's all over the planet. The planet has been sprayed with an accelerant. And God forbid we should have massive fires around the planet. It could get really ugly, of course. We are not alone, and we have divine grace, and we have a power that's much greater than the cretins of this world can even imagine, though they'd like to think that they're on top of the game. They're not. So we have at least that in our back pocket. So we've got the accelerant. It's everywhere. Now, this YouTuber, Truth by Grace, she's basically saying that this is a Judy Wood energy-directed weapon that was used on Napa and Sonoma County. Does anybody have a problem with that? I mean, in the aftermath of Las Vegas, does anybody have a problem with the fact that they would use something that would happen so quickly and to some extent even protect some of their sacred vineyard land? You should go look at her videos. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't vines that were burned, but these videos are quite compelling. So it almost appears as if these houses were targeted. Now, there's another thing that we may want to take notice of or take note of. Many years ago, I think this was back in probably around 2010, there was a massive fire in Pacifica, California. It was really bizarre. There was a woman who worked for PG&E, and she was involved with what was going on with gas lines, ironically enough. And she had found some data that was bad data, meaning that PG&E was doing some stuff that they shouldn't have been doing. And her house in Pacifica burned down. There was about four other houses that burned down, and it was a gas explosion through the gas lines. And I remember covering this and just feeling like, what happened here? This just seems so random. Why did this take place? Well, one could make a case that she was theoretically taken out. There are other people that saw an anomaly in the sky, like there was like a small missile or something like that that hit the neighborhood. Very strange stuff. But it reminds me in some ways of what's happened in Napa. And perhaps if these people were on the gas lines that PG&E was having a hard time with, that maybe this might have actually added to the mix. And I'm not saying that it is the actual cause of it. I'll see if I can find on my website. I did this piece on the Pacifica fire, God, it's a long time ago. I'll see if I can find it. But all of a sudden now we're talking about fires in Sonoma and Napa, and fires in Southern California too. I've seen pictures of charred land, brush fire in Southern California, out in the Tustin area, and it's pretty scary stuff. But we're talking about the fires now. We're not talking about Las Vegas. We're talking about what's happening in Napa and Sonoma. And we're talking about Harvey Weinstein or Harvey Weinstone, right? That's his name. Wine as in vineyard, stone as in hard vineyard. Vineyards turn to stone. How about that? I mean, it's a leap. It's associative thinking, but there you go. Now we're talking about Harvey Weinstein instead of Las Vegas. Now, this Weinstein thing is fascinating. He's kind of like become the Bernie Madoff of the entertainment industry, if you know what I mean, right? Like how so Bernie Madoff, part of a very tight-knit community, okay? Tight-knit community, hedge funders. I would say probably 90% Jewish. And very tight and very insular. And it's very rare when, and look, I'm going to try to expand this, okay? It's very rare when you see somebody inside of a group turn on one of their own. It's just the way it is. It's kind of like in the NFL. You have a locker room. A lot of shit happens in locker rooms in the NFL. Do you think we hear about it? No, only when, kind of a very immature Antonio Brown switches his cell phone on and does a little, Facebook Live in the locker room after a game. That's kind of about the only glimpse we get about something. But there are things that go on in locker rooms that we'll never know about. It's because people don't generally turn on their own, whether it's NFL players, whether it's cops. Serpico is an outlier and an anomaly. Politicians, they don't turn on their own generally, unless, of course, they're being directed to. So when Bernie Madoff wound up doing time, he obviously pissed off. Well, first of all, he got caught, number one. But he also must have pissed off enough people so that he wound up actually doing considerable time. His son died, by the way, too. That's another piece around Madoff that people don't talk about, is his post-prison death of his son, who was involved in his business as well. But it's rare. It's totally rare. Now here we go. Harvey Weinstein. That's right. He's now being held up as some kind of sacrifice. And I brought this up on Facebook. And Emma Carol Brown duly noted that a sacrifice is something that is pure, something that is untainted, something that has a high degree or level of emotional, psychic discharge. Whereas Harvey Weinstein is tainted meat. as she said over on Facebook. And that's true, he is. He's soured meat. But at the same time, they're devouring sour meat. They're devouring one of their own. So the question is why? They've known about Harvey Weinstein's garbage for years. Okay, come on now. I mean, that dirt's been piling up for decades, and all of a sudden they're gonna go in. They're gonna do it. It's all post Las Vegas because they want us to be talking about something else, and all of a sudden, all the liberals, all the progressives who once hailed him, all the liberal, all the progressive Democratic senators and Congress people like Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton, people that received money from Harvey Weinstein. Now, we're going to give the money to charity. We're going to give it to charity. We're going to take that money that he gave us, we're going to give it to charity. Like what charity? One of George Soros's groups? One of George Soros's Open Tides groups or Tide Foundation groups, the Open Society Tide Foundation groups? Come on now. So we're watching this bizarre kind of thing happening with Harvey Weinstein. Meryl Streep is coming out, and who's the latest? Asia Argento is now coming out. There's a dingbat. Asia Argento. My God. She was the director of this film it was based on the life of... It'll come to me. Anyway, Asia Argento's now come out and said, "Oh yes, he raped me too." And then there's Anthony Bourdain. Oh, she's so strong. She's just so powerful. I just love her. Oh, it's so courageous. So courageous. I just love this woman. Anthony, talk about a fall from grace in my head. Anthony Bourdain, he used to be interesting. I used to like Anthony Bourdain. And now it's like I can't even look at the guy, to be honest with you. So you've got all these people. He did this to me. He did this to me. He did this to me. You would have Terry Crews saying, I was fondled by a woman who was she was an agent, or I don't know what the relationship was, but now he's come out and said, I've had it too. I've had this happen to me too. Oh gee, Terry, don't seem that scarred by it with all those commercials for Old Spice and just about everything else you do. These people want to make me puke sometimes. Here they are. They come out and they're just gang tackling, piling on Harvey Weinstein. These are the new lines in their new script, and they're all mouthing their lines. And it did not keep them from being quote unquote successful, making all this money, going to all these public events, and being lionized like gods and goddesses. And like it didn't really harm all that now, did it? And now you're coming out and you're talking about the trauma. The trauma. It's a bunch of horse shit. And I just, people just need to stop going to movies. I'm sorry. I haven't been to a movie in a long time. I may go see Blade Runner. Because I'd like to see it. But I haven't been to a movie. When was the last time? I went to Guardians of the Galaxy 2 because my son wanted to see it. And before that, what the last movie I went to before that was? Guardians of the Galaxy 1. That's how infrequent I go to the movie theater. And I think we should just stop going in general. Just let this dinosaur just completely go the way of the dinosaurs. I think it's time. Anyway, it's just bizarre how all this is happening. And by the way, here's a headline for you. I used to know a guy. I knew a guy who was an actor in Hollywood. I don't want to divulge his name. You probably would know him if I brought his name up. You would know some things, some properties he was associated with. Anyway, a long time ago, he revealed to me that if you want a top agent in Hollywood, he would know. He grew up in Hollywood, was around it all of his life, and had to make certain sacrifices, meaning things that he would not do, which did not help him become successful. And this was a very talented, very funny, very bright guy. And he told me that if you want a top agent, like the top 5% of the agents in Hollywood, and these are the people that can basically make a phone call and get you a deal on a movie or a TV series, whatever it is, that you had to agree to be sodomized by said agents. Whether you're a man or a woman, it didn't matter. And he told me names. He told me names of famous actors that went through it, had to do it. And I don't have to share their names. You can just use your imagination and fill in the blanks, right? Yeah, that's what they do. And they do it for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they do it because it is a power game. And these guys, these agents get off on it, right? Number two, there's also something about encoding a person through Solomon's seal, as they like to call it, with DNA. Okay? You know what I mean? Because at that point, their DNA is in somebody else, but in a very specific place. We're talking root chakra, right? They are tapping in at a root chakra level, and it's not just about physical gratification. It is a genetic marker that is in that person for the rest of that person's life. Think voodoo, think sympathetic magic. This is why it happens. They own them. They own them from a contractual perspective and even from a genetic perspective. They are tapped into their root. And the people who agree and consent to it, well, they're at the base of it all, right? They are now basically owned by these people on a genetic and, in most cases, contractual level. This is what happens in Hollywood. So what we're seeing here with the Weinstein stuff is kind of the revelation of the method in some ways, bringing it back to center. That they reveal something. Okay, he's a monster. He masturbated in front of a journalist. He did this, he did that, and all these people were mute witnesses to it all. Meanwhile, they're gravy training every step of the way, every day with Weinstein in Miramax and all the pictures that they make and all the Oscars that they win. They just gravy train the whole way. But it's part of the revelation of the method, because what you're not seeing, right? It's kind of like, oh, isn't that awful? Isn't that ugly? But what you're not seeing is like 2 or 3 levels below it. And it's like, oh. Oh, hey, speaking of that, check this out, since we're on the subject. So there's this guy, I think his name is Rouse, R-O-U-S-E. I think that's his last name. He is the FBI guy in Vegas. Like when you see the sheriff in Las Vegas talking about what went on, there's that FBI guy that's right there on his left arm. You've seen the video. You've seen the guy. Do you know who that guy is? That's John Podesta's brother-in-law. John Podesta's brother-in-law is the FBI agent on the ground in Las Vegas. He is married to John Podesta's sister, that FBI guy. How about that? How about that? How freaky is that? That's got to send off some red alerts or some red lights in your brain. Anyway, the Weinstein event is part of the revelation of the method. What's happening 2, 3 levels below that, that's what's really going on. This Weinstein stuff, it's mice nuts. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not great, okay? It's just not great in general. But this is just like standard operating procedure shit, to be honest with you. So we have two distractions. We have the fire in Napa, which is completely bizarre. Go check out, I can't do it justice, go check out Truth by Grace, check out her videos. You can see what I'm talking about visually. It'll blow your minds. Okay, it'll absolutely blow your minds. Weinstein is being sacrificed. He is a distraction. It's part of the revelation of the method, Mr. Weinstein. Okay, so you know what? I wanted to get into the Trump stuff, the cloning stuff. And I've got some sources that I want to tap into here, but I'm going to save it. I know. But I don't want this Vegas thing to just go away. This is not going to be a memory hole moment. Look, if I have to talk about Las Vegas every day for the next 2 months, I'm going to do it. Even if it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't care. We're going to talk about this thing. It is not going to go away. You know, they're not going to news cycle this thing. They're not going to memory hole it. We're going to stay on it because this is it. This Las Vegas thing is big. It is big. It is another skeleton key. It is connected to 9/11. We saw the markers. We saw the astrological markers, and it's connected to Kennedy. It's all in the mix. It's all part of the continuum. It's all part of the timeline. All right. So tomorrow I'm going to get into the Trump stuff. And the Trump cloning material, which I think you'll find fascinating. All right, let me get out of here. You've got plenty to think about. And again, for everybody who has donated to the cause, thank you one more time. And they'll be putting the 11th House Club stuff up on the website hopefully today. Just have to work out sort of the fine points and details of everything. If you're interested in that, and basically what it will be, it's kind of a tiered system where you'll get some really good stuff from me. You'll get a discount on readings. You'll get a discount on. You'll actually get products from me. There's different tiers and some real nice incentives to kind of be a part of this. And this is where you actually this is not a donation. You're getting something from me. So we're exchanging. Energy, time, goods, services, all that stuff. So that'll be on the website soon. And of course, I am doing a webinar with Astrolata, and that's happening on the 28th of October. You can go to my Facebook page where I put it up there, and you can sign up. I'll also have a link up on my website today to sign up for that webinar. All right, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step when it's possible. I'm Robert.